Fear Zone, your horror channel. Good evening everyone, and now let's move on to today's story, which is about Mr. Fabio, and it happened to him, in the city of Manacor, which is in the state of Amazonas in Brazil, and at the time it was 1990, Mr. Fabio was 37 years old. And I'm going to tell you what happened to me, which was something I went through with a lot of terror, in one of my police incidents, in which I had to face a predatory and unknown creature, which used technology to hunt, and it seemed like I was in a science fiction movie. And it all starts like this. Nowadays I'm retired, but back then, I was a policeman in my town, which is in the state of Amazonas, and around here, you find several tribes of Indians living in the forests, and there are also many dangers in the region, where you see some people who have been killed, because they were attacked by anacondas, jaguars and alligators, and even insects. It's a very dangerous region, especially at night. However, one day, I was on the balcony in the backyard of my house, and at a certain time of night, I saw a strange light in the sky, and it looked like something on fire, and it fell into the forest, which was very far from my neighborhood. I was fascinated by it, because I didn't really know what it was, as it was the first time I'd seen something like that. But as that fireball fell very far from my house, I still stayed there for almost an hour, to see if I heard any other strange things, but nothing else happened, so I left it alone and went to sleep. The next day, I went to the police station to work as normal, and after a few hours, I went on a patrol with the police car through the streets of the neighborhood, and also near the Indian villages, which was more or less near where I had seen that fireball falling from the sky. But to my surprise, there was a group of Indians in front of the forest, and they seemed to be very frightened. I stopped the car and went to talk to them, and this group of Indians told me that 2 Indians had gone to hunt a supposedly ferocious animal that was in the jungle, but the 2 Indians were killed in the forest by an attack from something, and they said that it was this unknown animal that attacked them. So I thought it might be some kind of beast that did it. My partner and I went to see the bodies of these Indians, and when we got close to the site, we saw that these 2 men had been bitten and scratched to death by some kind of creature, but the strange thing was that there was a strange mist in this part of the forest, which was abnormal, but this smoke was gradually diminishing, and then the mist disappeared. But it didn't take long, and the coroners arrived, and they told me not to touch the bodies, because they looked like they had radiation, and that was a very strange thing for me. The coroners began to investigate the clues at the scene, and they didn't seem to understand what had happened, so they told me to leave the place, that they would solve this case, and strangely they told me that I wasn't supposed to tell anyone about this occurrence, that it was something confidential. So my partner and I left the place, and walking through the woods, we got to our car, but the Indians were still there and afraid to go back to their village, because they didn't even know what could have attacked the 2 Indians in the forest. We took these people to the neighborhood community center, so they wouldn't be attacked either, until we solved this case. The next day, with a lot of curiosity, I went with my police partner to make some rounds in the forest to try to find the dangerous animal, or some clue about it, and walking through the forest, we saw a dead jaguar, and it seemed to have been attacked by the same thing that attacked those 2 Indians. I started to get more worried and wanted to know who was behind it. As time went by, we left the jungle, and in the neighborhood, some Indians told us that from the tracks of this animal, it seemed to be some creature they didn't know, which was attacking people and animals in the forest. Anyway, the days went by, and more attacks happened, as I saw large caimans and huge anacondas killed in the forest, and by the same type of attack. With these occurrences, I and 5 other police officers decided to go on patrol in the jungle. With the team, we entered the jungle and started walking through the forest and near the rivers, trying to find out who was carrying out these attacks. We split up into 2 groups, and there were 3 men on one side of the forest, and me and 2 other men went to the other side. We walked around this place for almost the whole day, but we didn't find anything, but as we walked through the jungle, we soon met a man who called out to us, and he lived on a farm near the forest. This country bumpkin told us that around 10 o'clock he saw a mist appear near his property, and so he heard footsteps and growls coming from the mist, but he didn't know what it was. But it sounded like an animal running and chasing another beast, the country bumpkin became afraid of the noises. And he took his rifle and kept watch. After a few minutes, the noises stopped and there was a silence in the mist, and suddenly the mist disappeared, but the man's dogs kept barking under the tree. He became suspicious, and went out into the yard. This man thought it might be a jaguar, which would be on top of that tree, and ready to attack his dogs, the redneck then. He fired into the foliage of the tree, and something fell out of the tree onto the ground, but to the farmer's surprise, when it rose up from the bushes, the beast was standing like a man, balancing on two legs, but it was a humanoid creature, like a crab or something, orange in color, and it growled angrily at the dogs. In desperation, the landowner shot at the creature several times, and it was hit and fell to the ground in the woods, but the creature got up and stood up, and ran off into the woods and disappeared. Well, this story left us even more confused, but we could tell that it could be some creature or some ferocious animal that was hiding in the forest, and for me, this animal that the landowner faced was linked to the deaths that had been happening in the jungle. Anyway, as many hours had passed, we put it behind us and went back to our homes. The next day, my partner and I were on a car patrol near the forest again. And suddenly, an Indian came running down the road, and he was very scared, because he said he saw two strange creatures walking in the woods, and that one of them ran after him. At that moment, my partner and I got out of the car and went into the forest with our guns in our hands, and for me it was the clue I needed, and with the report of the farmer and the Indian, it was certainly some dangerous animal that was causing all this terror. As the Indian's clue was recent, we started walking through the forest quickly so as not to lose track of the creature, and then we walked for a few minutes where the Indian said he saw the creature. To our surprise, we saw a strange mist, which only existed in one place in the forest, as I had seen this mist before, and the redneck also spoke of this mist, so we entered this mist, to see what was happening there, but then we heard some horrifying noises, and it sounded like two creatures fighting in the forest, but we couldn't see who was fighting, because the mist was very white, and looked like very concentrated smoke. Even though we couldn't see anything, we got closer to the noises, and it sounded like the sound of heavy blows. We were frightened by this, and decided to wait for the noises to stop before we took action. But soon the sounds of fighting stopped, but it seemed that one of the beasts was making desperate roars, as if it had been captured. However, the mist suddenly subsided a little, and my partner said he would walk forward, so that we could surround these beasts, so he walked very slowly through the woods, and I waited on the spot. Then the mist disappeared, and I could see something strange in the forest, because there was a man wearing strange clothes, which looked like armor, and he was wearing a kind of iron mask too, and he was walking in the undergrowth, but it looked like he was carrying something, in a kind of fishing net. I thought that was strange, and I started to follow this guy too, at a good distance from him, so he wouldn't notice me, but to my surprise, at that time, my friend came out of the bush, and pointed the gun at that man in armor. I noticed that the strange hunter, he was tall and strong, and I also came out of the bush with my gun, surrounding that man in armor on both sides so that he wouldn't run away, but that being was confused by our action, but as soon as I looked to see what that strange man was carrying, I saw a strange and weird creature, trapped in a fishing net, and it was a humanoid creature, which seemed to be a type of large crab, and bigger than a man, but it had strange arms and legs. Just as that landowner had told us, and I was startled by it, and couldn't believe what I was seeing, but as I took a closer look at that hunter in armor, I began to notice that although he looked human, his skin was colored light and dark green. Finally, that being just stood there looking at us, while the mist cleared, and suddenly we saw something unbelievable, because there was a kind of spaceship near us, about 40 meters long, and it looked like something with very advanced technology, and it was hidden in the middle of all that mist. But that being started fiddling with something on his forearm, which looked like some kind of strange device. Suddenly, I started hearing some kind of high-pitched, electronic sound in my mind that stopped me, and I couldn't move. I looked at my policeman partner, and he wasn't moving either. At that moment, I became afraid that this being was going to kill us, and he then started walking towards my friend. I continued to fight against this paralysis, to try to save my police partner from a possible attack by this being, but I couldn't do it, because my nervous system seemed to be off. I couldn't feel my arms and legs. But it stood in front of my partner, and this hunter took his iron mask off his face, and so I noticed that this stranger was some kind of humanoid alien, who seemed to be some kind of reptilian man, or something, and he had some kind of braids coming out of his head, and it was something frightening about this creature. As soon as that being took off his mask, he stared into my policeman partner's eyes. Of course, I was afraid that he might do him some harm, but he didn't do anything, and after a few minutes or so, this alien put his mask back on his face, and went away dragging that other creature, which he had captured in the net, and they got into the ship. After that, that ship turned on and made no noise, and made a quick takeoff, up to about 100 meters in the air, and then the ship left at great speed, which even caught fire in the sky, as if it were a trail, and disappeared from our sight. I was very frightened by everything that had happened, and little by little, I managed to recover from the paralyzing effects of that strange sound, which came from some of the alien's devices. As soon as I recovered from the effects, I was back to normal, and my partner and I ran away from that place, and we fled into the woods, and we got to our police car, and we were terrified, and even so we went back to the police station, to see what we were going to do about this case, which was something very serious and dangerous for anyone to know about. And talking to my partner, he said that at the time the creature looked into his eyes, the predatory alien telepathically entered his mind, and said that he was passing close to this planet and there was a problem with the ship, and he had to go down and land his ship in the forest to fix it, and because of a mistake in the damaged computer, that crab creature managed to escape from the ship and entered the forest, and he was on a mission to hunt down this predatory creature, because he was violent and would kill the animals and human beings that crossed his path, and this creature was from a planet in another galaxy, and that this creature hid in the rivers, so we couldn't find him, because he was an aquatic being too. The alien hunter told me that the mist was part of his technology, in which he used the mist to hide and hunt without anyone seeing him. This alien said that he was a predator of the universe, and that he challenged very strong beings to a fair fight to the death, and that my partner and I were too weak to face him. After that day, I was frightened by this encounter with these predators, and I avoided going into the forests. My partner and I agreed to keep it a secret, but if the attacks were repeated we would have to ask the government for help in hunting down these aliens, because they are very dangerous and use advanced technology. But as time went by, there were no more strange attacks, and the indigenous people returned to their villages. One day, I was in the bar drinking, and I saw that a movie was going to be shown, of Arnold Schwarzenegger against a predatory alien, in a forest. I got interested and watched this science fiction movie, and I remembered this alien, because he was identical to the predator that attacked me in the forest, only my predator's armor protected the alien's entire body. But one thing I saw in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie was that he had clay on his body, which fooled the predator. And to this day, when someone says they've seen something strange, or bright lights in the sky, or some strange being, I think it might be the alien predator, but I hope I never meet one of these beings again. Well, if you liked the story, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel, until the next predator story.